Russia has downed a U.S. drone over the Black Sea. Is it a portend of conflict to come? Probably not. But Ukraine does appear to be on the counterattack in Bakhmut. But is that enough? We are going to be taking a look right now. I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. It's March 15th, 2023. This is your daily Ukraine update. Let's get into it. Okay, first, let's take a look at the control map. As you guys can see, Russian forces advancing through the north of the city at a steady pace into this northern industrial area. As we've seen, these Russian troops are quite able to advance in this sort of block by block piecemeal fashion through Bakhmut, especially once they get a foothold. As you can see, more and more of the city is considered under fire. And when we look to the north, you can see that Russian forces continuing to try to expand this northern prong into the village of Zalivznyansky. But you guys can see it literally, we can't even see if there's a roadway or anything there. So it's hard to say that this is a really significant gain. The biggest two issues, of course, remain the fact that this southern roadway remains in extreme danger from Russian forces just a few meters away, as does the northern evacuation road. Again, the fact that this fight has continued as long as it has really shocks me. When we look over at the combat map, you can see Russian forces pushing hard in Bakhmut. What's interesting is there's a report that a Russian Su-24 was downed near Bakhmut, which itself is interesting. It says that Russia is committing its very limited air assets to taking this city, which is a sign that, again, these air assets are not committed elsewhere. So, as I've repeatedly said, Ukraine needs to complete this withdrawal, pinning these elite Russian troops in place, and concurrently launch their own offensive effort. When we look to the south, you can see that there is a lot of action, but not a lot of movement, again, from these DNR, LNR forces to the south. Where things get really interesting is when we talk about the two Russian Su-27 aircraft that downed a U.S.-made MQ-9 Reaper drone over the Black Sea. This is an international airspace, and while the MQ-9 is can be an armed drone, it's not clear that it was armed at the time it was downed. The U.S. general said that two Russian aircraft hit the drone, nearly causing both aircraft to crash and the resulting loss of the drone. This is not what you would do for a planned aircraft takedown, right? We saw, even for something as paltry as a Chinese spy balloon, U.S. fighter aircraft used an air-to-air missile to get that kill. So this says that this was not intentional, that this was an accident by Russian forces. The drones generally don't have the responsiveness or maneuverability to juke out an incoming fighter jet. They're also just not that fast relative to fighter aircraft. Russian Ministry of Defense said the drone crashed due to sharp maneuvering. Sort of true, I guess. But the incident, right, and the Institute for the Study of War correctly identifies this incident will not cause an escalation because they call it coercive signaling. This is the Russian forces' willingness to fly really close to U.S. Naval assets, air assets, this sort of stalking and game-playing behavior. This is common for Russian forces. And it, again, seems like this was not an act of war. This was the military version of fuck around and find out, or play stupid games, win stupid prizes. The Russians think it's a good idea to fly extremely recklessly close to a U.S. drone. Then they shouldn't be mad when they hit it. It's a drone. It's not that maneuverable, and it's not that, like, it can't get out of the way like a human aircraft can. And they point out this has been going on for decades in multiple theaters, hasn't led to an escalated conflict, and that while the U.S. and Russian presidents can choose how to respond to such incidents, it's not a given that this is going to escalate, right? Russia's going to make a bunch of empty promises and a bunch of empty rhetoric, just like they do with their nuclear arsenal, and then nothing will come of it. And again, the Kremlin has way more to lose by escalating this than the U.S. does, right? The U.S. would have to fight, Russian conscripts with World War II era weapons. It would probably be like an afternoon's work for maybe like one brigade. Again, hard to understate that Russia is currently in a dead heat with the Ukrainian army, who, as of probably 6 months ago, the entire army was like taxi drivers and programmers and stuff. Not exactly a sign that they want to go mess with any bigger dogs. And Poland's discussing providing MiG-29s to Ukraine within 4 to 6 weeks. Poland not playing games, guys. And the Ukrainian Air Force already operates MiG-29s and would be able to put them right into use if Ukraine receives them with enough time ahead of its next counteroffensive, which should be soon. Again, I'm just in awe of the level of like delays that are going on here. The efforts by the Ukrainian armed forces to hold Bakhmut in spite of common sense. It's hard to understate. And I wonder, behind the scenes, if there's some major linchpin in the planning for this counteroffensive that they just cannot seem to remove. I hope it's not, holding out for bigger and better toys, because ultimately they have to have some faith in their own armed forces. They're not that bad. They're combat experienced. They have successfully launched one offensive to great effect. So it's not clear that waiting for these Brads or these bigger tanks is going to be the right call. You'll never have the perfect military that you really want. You've got to fight with the one that you've got on the ground and have confidence that even if the momentum doesn't really get going until the Brads and the main battle tanks show up, you can still really start to make a lot of progress. And again, fighting these poorly trained, poorly equipped Russian troops, even with your own relatively substandard equipment, can still produce some serious effects. Anyway, guys, that's all I had for you. I am going to point out there's no Patreon shout out, but there's a big announcement coming soon. It's going to be huge, and it's going to make a huge difference to the channel. So thank you guys for supporting me. Yeah, Patreon subs know what's going on, but we're just going to keep it under wraps for one more day. All right, take it easy, guys. Have a good one.